Hi, welcome to How to Be a Humane Leader Without Losing Your Job. In this podcast, we dive into compassionate leadership in today's fast-paced business environment. With our experience and insights, we'll help you lead with heart while securing your career. Join us for engaging conversations and practical advice to elevate your leadership skills and make a real difference. I'm your host, Roberto Torres, a seasoned startup engineering leader, alongside Chris Olerkin, a Fortune 100 IT leader. Today, we're discussing what's needed to foster innovation at the workplace with the team. Hi, Chris. How are you?
Good morning, Roberto. I'm doing good. I hope you're well.
I am. Thank you very much. And before we begin the topic, I remember well when we began devising this podcast, and we had this podcast and a list of names for the podcast that I suggested something related to wise, to the word wise and something like that. And you told me that no, that name would be wise to use because we as leaders, we don't know everything and we have to go further. So with this in mind, do you think that leaders and maybe humane leaders has to have all the knowledge, all the ideas?
I think it's a trap many leaders fall into is that they think they have to have all the best ideas and have, the winning idea or be that type of a leader. I personally have found when I was very young, right, your promotions very likely were because you had very good innovative ideas. But as you get older, you got to realize you got to give people the opportunity to innovate. So I think, being a humane leader to foster that innovation, you have to be able to kind of step back and give people those opportunities to innovate. I certainly struggled with it myself as a humane leader because I worked in an engineering company. Ideas and creativity and patents and all those things are a big part of our culture. And so innovators typically got promoted, but you had to learn to be a humane leader and invigorate others around you on your team to innovate. And it can be challenging because it's kind of in your ego as a leader that I'm going to have the best ideas. It's hard to step back sometimes and let others lead that charge.
Yeah, indeed. It is challenging for your ego because let's say we are about 50 years old. We got into maybe a new company, and we say to ourselves, I have this huge amount of expertise, this huge amount of results that have been given to previous companies. So in this new company, I will set, the path, the roadmap maybe to innovation, and it is a mistake because ideas doesn't come from only us because everybody has a different mindset, a different perspective, a different life in which they might have better ideas regarding maybe a problem, maybe a solution that it is required, maybe a revenue stream. I don't know, many things. But I think that by fostering innovation within the team is really important. And by doing this, I will add that rather than thinking maybe vertically, we have to think horizontally. And that is within all the team, provide this environment, this healthy environment to say, hey, what's needed? What do you have in mind? How could we maybe apply some of this? Or maybe how could we gather one idea and see if it's feasible or not?
Yes, I agree completely. And the key would be to use phrases like, Roberto, that's a very interesting suggestion. Now, personally, in the back of my head, I'm thinking, hey, I tried that 3 years ago. It was a complete failure. But a humane leader is going to say, Well, that's an interesting idea, Roberto. Tell me a bit more about it, because I am concerned that there could be challenges with it. Don't say what failures were in the past. Just let Roberto explain, and maybe there's some aspects or nuances or a different angle that you have, that the reason it failed when I tried it prior to becoming a leader are different now. And again, letting the rest of the team, depending on how you're collaborating and how your company's culture does these kinds of things, get other people to chime in on how do we attack this? How do we ensure that it's successful? What different things do we do? The unhumane leader is going to shut it down right away and say, Roberto, I did that 3 years ago. It ain't going to work. Somebody else got an idea, and be dismissive of Roberto. That will squash innovation immediately. So you have to be able to give people some room to explain and I don't want to say defend. Defend is the wrong word. Give them opportunity to fully describe the solution and the angle that they're using that's probably different than what you did 3-4 years ago.
Yeah, indeed. With that in mind, a boss, not a bad leader, a boss might say, "Hey, do you remember my rank? Do you remember my position?" And they might say something up to that it isn't for the way. But I think that when you started this, you mentioned that back in your mind you had to say something. You said it to this person. You had to maybe say maybe in two ways, maybe in two different ways. The first one, it is with the whole team. Hey, Chris, that is a nice idea, because with that you will say to the whole team that you acknowledge this good idea, and the whole team has to participate. Maybe I don't know, maybe go to a brainstorming session, with post-its, and see if it works. Maybe set aside maybe half an hour or an hour with the whole team. Hey, let's do a diagram. What do you think of this? Is it feasible? Is it not? That is one. And the second one, if this person has told you maybe on a one-on-one or maybe at the water cooler or something like that, you might say in the next team meeting, hey, Chris told me about this idea. So you're giving credit to this person. And people will feel good, will feel excited and fired up because, hey, my leader is acknowledging my idea that might be really, really bad, might be really, really awesome, but in the end, has acknowledged my idea and has given me credit. And
Absolutely.
yeah, let me tell you something. I always give credit to people by the ideas rather than escalating, maybe bringing this idea to my manager and say, "Hey, we have this idea," or "I have this idea." No, guess what? Let's say Luis had this idea and he told me this, or Katie had this idea, and with that, a humane leader will remain being a humane by sticking with everybody.
Yes, I agree. And you need to be very careful in those kinds of communications, as you're pointing out. You want to be supportive and enthusiastic, but use adjectives that are not judgmental, because
Okay.
you're also seeking out the feedback from the other team members. So if I, as the humane leader, say, Roberto, that is a great idea, let's discuss it with the team. Now some of the team members who maybe think, well, I think there's some challenges with that. The database structure is going to make the performance poor, but Chris said it's a great idea. I better not bring up my criticisms,
Well,
So if you're too positive, you can have a negative effect on the feedback loop, or vice versa. Hey, Roberto's got this idea. I'm not sure if it'll work. Let's talk about it. Oh, well, Chris thinks it won't work. I better only say things that support Chris's perspective that it won't work. So instead, you want to say things, Roberto's got an interesting idea. Let's explore it. That's very neutral. You don't know whether I think it's good, bad, neutral. And a humane leader wants, everyone, or as many people that are willing to give their input, to give input that is truly their perspective. And you got to be very careful certainly as a junior leader, right? Because that's when we usually make most of our mistakes, because hopefully we learn from them over time, is don't sway the discussion in the beginning. Now, maybe after you've discussed it, and let's suppose this is a brainstorming session and this idea is worthy of 1 hour of brainstorming. Well, now that you're a half an hour into it or something, and people have all expressed their perspectives, maybe as the leader, you got to steer it a little bit to conclusion. You've learned some things from some of the people said. Now we need to come to conclusion. Then you can start to steer the best ideas and wade through that. Because as a leader, ultimately, you're going to be accountable for it. So you do have to steer it at some point. But I think it's very critical that you are not at the onset, at the very beginning, pointing it in one direction or the other. Roberto has an idea. I really want the team to discuss it. It's kind of positive, but you can't tell for sure whether I'm for it or against it.
Wow, Judith, I learned a lot from you. Actually, because I didn't see it that way. And I totally agree with you now thinking about it. Yes, because I might be too eager and people might, rather than add, might be going the opposite way. Okay?
Because
Okay.
what if the person's idea really is terrible, right? You don't want to squash him, but you also don't want the other team members to be fearful of expressing that the idea isn't good and here's the 5 reasons why. So that's why, as the leader, as a humane leader, you're very aware of those interpersonal skills and things and signals that you give to the team to the best of your ability. Can't do it all the time. I'm not perfect at it, but all I'm suggesting is, as a humane leader, think about the words that you're choosing and realize that they could steer an outcome before you've even debated the topic.
Yeah. Well, and with that in mind, words are such powerful tools that either to go um, the good or the bad way. So a humane leader, as you mentioned, as widely say, it has to select the best words in each scenario, in each situation. Yeah. Okay. And let's say, for instance, that how let's say that you're not a manager or a humane leader or a leader, and you hear your leader to say, "Hey, I'm excited with this," but you found out that it might not be a good um, idea to work on this. How would you address your leader to express this?
Well, I can tell you I've made lots of mistakes doing that. And so the way I would do it now, right, learning from experience, is I would absolutely have to call them aside, one-to-one conversation, the initial discussion of why I don't think it will work. Too many times, I think partially because of my ego, partially because it was a heated discussion on the topic, I would point out the flaws, and the boss above me would get upset because now it makes him or her make them seem unintelligent or uninformed or misinformed or not a good leader. So you do have to, if it is the leader's idea, you have to be very careful about bringing it up to them that it won't work. Again, if it's somebody you've worked with for 10 years and you've always had this rapport of strong, healthy debate, probably not as big of a deal. Hey, you've only been working for this boss for a year and the idea is not so good. It's probably not a good idea in a group of 20 people to call out, "Hey boss, your idea is stupid." Not a good career move.
Yeah, yeah, I understand. And Okay, and before we begin recording this podcast, I mentioned you that I was going to talk about a project that an idea might be or a bunch of ideas in a company that I used to work for that killed the business. Right now, what you mentioned that it goes with this example. This let me tell you, I was working at a company, and the CEO was very fond of providing ideas. And if the CEO tell us to work on something in particular, we began working. The problem was that the ideas were nurturing. Each idea we were constantly changing, and the customers, as well as us, which were building the product, the service as well, were totally lost because each time this person arrived with a new idea. So we jump into development without saying to our boss, which was the owner of the company, saying this idea might not be good, but since he was the CEO and he was really adamant about creating this idea and adding it into the pipeline and adding it to the service, we had to do it. The problem was that I think it was maybe in a 3 month period, we have 17 changes. And that killed the business because the customers say, hey, I love what I had a functionality before. It was something that solved the problem. Right now, I had to do more clicks and more steps to reach to that. I'd rather not do it again. And we lost that business. That company had another revenue streams, but it killed that business. So I think that the problem here is don't let your ego hold of everything related to you. You must, by fostering innovation, it is to let the people in the team communicate with you. Is it good? It is not. It is only because your stomach is saying we had to go like this or go with a product methodology. I don't know, maybe a lean startup or an agile. In the end, I think that foster innovation is to take away your ego and do not let run your decisions and be a team member rather than a leader.
Yeah, I do. I think in the startups, like your experiences, that the problem is a lot of the people, the type A personalities that start a company and do that, like I mentioned kind of at the beginning of our discussion, that as a younger leader, you got promoted because of your great ideas. Well, these type A, entrepreneurs, they've started their businesses on the faith that their great idea is going to win the day. So it can be quite the challenge to work with that kind of leader, to let him or her, kind of step away from the product a bit. It's grown, it's got customers. Well, you got to start doing some more mature type leadership things, right? Feedback loops of, is this innovation what the customers are looking for? What are other people's opinions and perspectives? I think a true humane leader realizes when certain things are facts and certain things are opinions. And unfortunately, in the case you're discussing, that leader let opinions, their personal opinion, overpower everything.
Mhm.
And unfortunately, at first the person's opinion was correct. The product was doing well. But at some point it diverged, and those opinions that the leader had were not correct. And if that person had been more humane about it and solicited feedback from the team and worked with other departments, marketing and sales, and hey, how is the last two ideas coming? What's the feedback from the customers? Oh my God, it's terrible. Then maybe my opinions aren't quite working in the environment. I wonder why that is, right? Reflection, and we've talked about that before, where the humane leader does have to look inward sometimes to determine, am I on the right path? Am I right more often than I'm wrong? And unfortunately, in this case, it sounds like that leader wasn't being very humane, perhaps very innovative, but innovative with unsuccessful customer requirements, right? It was very innovative for the product. Unfortunately, no customers wanted it.
Yeah, yes, and I think that even though this is a podcast in which we talk about humane leadership, we have to think coldly sometimes regarding that some ideas might not be a benefit for the business. Because right now, you and I know that there are many, like 60 or 70 different programming languages, maybe, I don't know, 30 or 40 databases. And suddenly, when someone creates a new programming language, I usually ask myself, is it really worth? Is it is going to bring something? Or just because you say, oh my God, I have this idea, I'm going to create a new language. My God, really? Maybe stick with the other ones because it is proof. So to be cold, it is not to be a humane leader. I think a humane leader that has to be told in certain aspects is teaching the team members when to say yes eagerly, when to say cautiously yes, and when to say no. You know, this all hard data proves. Otherwise, it is not related to me. It is from the industry, from this team, from this company. Huh?
Yeah, it is inhumane. You are not being a humane leader, letting the team or the company completely fail when it can be averted, when you can participate with the team and steer it away from facts that they may not be aware of. A humane leader doesn't let a product fail like that. The humane leader, if that COO or whatever his role was there had all these features, as a humane leader, they would have started to seek that feedback and realize that we're losing customers, which is going to impact my team members, right? They may lose their jobs. So that humane leader is going to say, maybe my ideas are not that innovative. They may be innovative, but not marketable, not sellable, because that's a big difference. You can innovate. There's a lot of amazing innovations, but if there's no customer marketplace demand for it, it's just an interesting curiosity. It's not a product. So, a humane leader is going to recognize, get that feedback, and save the team and save the company by saying, you know what, I was wrong. Let's get the team back together and get on track for what our customers really want. And that's the kind of leader that I would want to work for.
Yeah, indeed. And let me close with this. I think that I spoke of this engineering metric some podcasts ago, but there is customer churn. What the customer churn is, we have a code churn. All the money that we spend by creating all that code hours and everything, it will go away. So we have to act wisely and to foster innovation, but maybe setting some ground rules, you know. So people will say, no, this deviates a lot from these ground rules. It is not maybe needed to work with, but if it's set, if these ground rules, it might go okay.
Absolutely. And the more you can set those kinds of ground rules up front, that no one's surprised by them. They're not getting called out in front of the team that they violated them because they never knew the rules to begin with, in terms of the framework of how you're going to judge ideas based on revenue, based on facts, based on feature sets, cost to program. Those kinds of things can help your team be successful when you're a humane leader. So very good points, Roberto.
No, 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 thanks to you. That depend on myself. Okay. I think with this, we should do the wrap up. Do you agree?
Sure.
Thank you. Okay, so, well, thanks for joining us on another episode of How to Be a Humane Leader Without Losing Your Job. We hope our insights help you become a smarter and more strategic leader. Apply today's lessons to see the positive impact on your team and career. Catch all our episodes on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Anchor, and YouTube. Join us next week as we discuss something trendy in the leadership world. Until then, stay humane and stay successful. Bye bye, Chris.
See you later, Roberto.